What's up everyone, it's Jonny from Jeddle here, and I'm back to share another tip to help you maximize your results, in this case, to get the best ATAR possible. So, how can you actually study less and still get an ATAR above 99? So here's how I was able to get an ATAR of 99.8, and here's how hundreds of other students that I've taught and spoken with were also able to get an ATAR above 99 by actually studying less. And to understand this really important study strategy, I need to tell you a story. And it's a true story about an Italian man called Pareto. And Pareto had a vegetable garden at his home. And in that vegetable garden, he noticed something curious. He noticed that not all of the pea pods were producing the same amount of peas. So one pea pod might have had 10 peas inside of it, whereas another pea pod might have only had one. And when he added up all the peas and he looked at all the pea pods, he discovered something really interesting, that 80% of the peas came from 20% of the pods. So not all pods are equal. 20% of what he put in was producing 80% of the result. Now, because Pareto was an economist, this actually inspired a broader study, a study of people and wealth. And Pareto wanted to find out, does this principle apply for other things? So he went and looked at all of the land ownership in Italy, and he found that 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the population. So it wasn't evenly distributed, but it was the same ratio as the peas. So by first looking at his vegetable garden and then looking at the entire Italian population in terms of how much land they owned, he was able to discover a universal principle. And you can apply this to your study, and you should apply it. And it's called the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto Principle. And the Pareto Principle, or the 80-20 rule, is about how 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort. 80% of the output comes from 20% of the input. So there are certain things that actually produce a disproportionate result. Not all things will produce the same result. So therefore, what we should all be doing is looking for those 80-20s in life. And of course, if you're studying, you want to apply the 80-20 to your study routine and what you focus on. Because why spend time on things that don't matter as much? Now, it is 80-20, so 80% of the result comes from 20% of the effort. That won't allow you to get 100% of the results though. If you want to get 100% on an exam, the 80-20 rule will only let you get up to 80%. But what it actually tells you is what to focus most of your time on. So you still spend time on other things, but once you find out what that key 20% is, what is the 20% activity? What is the 20% study habit that's going to give me 80% of the marks? Once you know that, then you can spend majority of your time on that, up to 80% say, and then spend only a little bit of time on the other things. Because when you're studying, what most people do is they spend time on things that just don't matter. They do things that are comfortable and easy and that feel like you should do, but they're not the things that are gonna produce the greatest result. And this is a rule, this is a principle that I applied all throughout school, all throughout university, and that I continue to try to apply throughout every aspect of my life. So what I'm going to do is take you through some different subjects, because the goal of this is to help you focus your time on the things that matter, so you'll be able to get a better mark by studying less. Now, let's have a look at my subjects that I did in the HSC. Hey everyone, it's Jonny from Jeddle, and if you want to check out state rank examples, band 6 analysis, step-by-step guides to constructing the perfect essays, craft of writing pieces, whatever it is that you need for your English exams, then go to jeddle.com. We've put everything in one place for you so that you don't need to look any further to get everything you need to succeed in your exams. And if you want to submit a draft and get expert marking, or you want to use our marking tools to get specific suggestions on how you can improve your essays, your creative writing pieces, anytime, anywhere, make sure you sign up to Jedi today. I did 3 units of English, 4 units of maths, 2 units of economics, and 1 unit of studies of religion. For each of those subjects, I applied the 80-20 rule. I thought about all the things I could do to study for that subject to get the highest mark, and I narrowed it down to the one thing which, if I spent most of my time on, would give me the greatest mark. That one thing is preparing a draft, a core draft essay for each module. For 80 out of the 100 marks, if you were to prepare a core draft, you would almost be there in terms of your preparation. Of course, there are a number of other things that you should be doing. You should reread the text. You should look up notes. But if you do that one core thing of just preparing a draft, putting in the work to actually prepare a draft so you have something ready to go for each module, that gets you 80% of the way there. That's what I found. I spent all of my time on this, and I will include as part of that core draft is making it a perfected draft, a refined draft. So that will include editing. That will include getting feedback from your teachers. It encompasses those things. But what it doesn't include is writing down bullet point notes, doing mind maps, going and rewatching something 10 times, rereading the book 10 times. Those things, they might be important, but until you've actually written a draft and got into the practice of doing what you're going to do in the exam, you're nowhere close to being ready to get top marks. So for maths, for me, if I did up to 10 past papers to prepare for an exam, that was my 80-20. Because if I did nothing else other than those 10 papers and practiced answering questions that were likely to be asked on the day of the exam and just worked through it, and I struggled through the questions that I didn't know, even if I wasn't allowed to do anything else, that would get me 80% of the way there. But of course, I then need to make sure that I understand the topics more deeply, that I understand why I'm getting questions wrong. That's where 80% of the other study activities come in. Because if I'm just taking 20% of what I could be doing with my math study and I'm focusing on past papers, there still are other things that are going to be important to get me that additional 20% of marks. But the 80-20 allows me to be focused. It allows me to prioritize my time, because you don't have that much time throughout year 12 or any other year for that matter when you're dealing with all these subjects. So 80-20 maths is past papers. But here's how you can apply the 80-20 even more closely. Say I'm doing the 80-20 and I'm saying I'm going to spend about 80% of my time just doing past papers when I study for maths. Well, now when I'm doing those past papers, if I can identify my weakest 20% of topics, then I can now spend 80% of my time on those specific topics when I'm doing other revision. Because chances are, based on Pareto's rule, the 80-20 rule, 80% of my mistakes are also coming from 20% of my understanding. So 20% of topics, 20% of the question types, I'm not able to get my head around. That's producing most of the errors. Because we all know that when you're doing maths or any other subject, there are certain topics that you're going to be more comfortable with than others. So spend most of your time revising the things you don't know. It sounds very obvious, right? But it's 80-20. It's a lot more than you think. You should be spending the vast majority of time, 80% of your time, on those weakest topics. But guess what? This is where discipline comes in. No one wants to do that. That's why everyone is doing pages and pages of notes and summaries and topic revisions, because they're avoiding the things that truly matter. And I feel like a lot of people know what truly matters, but it actually takes the most discipline because it's the hardest thing to do. To sit down with an actual paper, to force yourself to write full sentence answers, to force yourself to work through really hard maths problems or economics problems, business, whatever it is, that takes a lot more will and discipline than simply sitting down with a textbook, reading a page, and then summarizing it in a couple of dot points. But if you can have the discipline to spend most of your time on that 80-20 exercise, you will do exponentially better. Now, what about my other subjects? I did economics, 2 units, and 1 unit of religion. Now, for those 2 subjects, I just found that if I went through all of the syllabus dot points, I went through every single dot point for each topic, and I just wrote out a short answer. I had a short answer response, a few sentences, encapsulating my understanding of that topic point, then that would be my 80-20. If I was just prepared for that, I would be 80% of the way. Now, I'm not all of the way there because the economics paper also had essays involved. But by doing the summaries of each dot point in an answer form, in an exam format, so I at least had something for every single point, I had most of the content available for the essays as well. But to get the extra 20%, I needed to also plan essay structures. I needed to have essay plans for the different topics, and I need to have practiced doing those, of course, as well. There's a 20-mark multiple choice section for that exam. If I had written out those short answers for each syllabus dot point, I would be ready to answer all of those multiple choice. I did the same for SOR. And then the other critical piece of this, of course, is once you have that answer to each syllabus dot point, say it's 3 or 4 sentences for each one, really encapsulating your understanding, you then need to apply it to past papers. So that's what I spent almost all of my time doing for economics and religion. I would have these very short answers for each syllabus dot point, and then I would have past papers and I would just apply them. And I would just answer them as best I could without even looking at those syllabus dot point notes. And then anything that I couldn't answer in the past paper, or anything I couldn't find in my original responses, I would then go and add in based on looking at a textbook, looking online, asking a teacher. Again, that's where we come back to those other exercises that are important, but you actually don't need to use as much. I hope that helps you with your study approach. 80-20 rule, it's a universal truth that has helped me a lot. So let me know how you go with it. Let me know in the comments what your 80-20 practices are, and I'll see you in the next one.